Hello. Um, for these, you are changing the decimals or fractions into percents. To change a decimal into a percent, you multiply it by 100 or move the decimal point 2 spots to the right, as you did in the first two. For part C, if you say the fraction 3/10, that's equal to 3/10, and then you can move the decimal 2 spots to the right. When there's an empty jump, you can put a 0 in there, and that would be equal to 30%. And for 3/8, that's a tough one. What I would do is I would take a calculator and take the numerator divided by the denominator. Once you do that, you get a decimal point. You multiply that by 100, or you move the decimals 2 spots to the right, and that turns the decimal into a percent, which would be 37.5%. As you are doing these, you can skip ahead to problems that you did not get correct for an explanation. If something doesn't make sense after watching it a few times, please come and see me so we can go over it together. Make sure that you are understanding this as we go forward. For these problems, 8% of $40 and 15% of $75. The word of means I'm multiplying. When I'm doing this, I am going to turn the percent into a decimal. I turn the percent into a decimal either by moving the decimal point 2 spots to the left or dividing 8% by 100. And 8% is 0.08. You times it by 40, and that's going to give us our answer of 3.2. We should add the 0 in the dollar place because it is money, so we should go to the hundredths place. 15% of 75, well, I'm going to change 15% into a decimal, which would be 0.15. Move the decimal point 2 spots to the left to do that. And I multiply the two, and then I'm going to get my answer of $11.25. And that's how I did those problems. For these problems, we are changing the number of students, and we're finding the percent. The first thing we need to do is find the total number of students. So we add up all of the numbers, all the students, and we get 180. Then we can write each of these as a fraction. So 38 over 180, 44 over 180, 42 over 180, 56 over 180. To turn a fraction into a percent, you take the top number and divide it by the bottom number, numerator divided by denominator, and you get a decimal. You can move the decimal point 2 spots to the right or multiply that by 100 to get the percentage. And it says in the directions, round it to the nearest whole percent, or basically round it to the nearest whole number. So you take the numerator, divide it by the denominator, you get a decimal, you multiply that by 100, or you move the decimal point 2 spots to the right, and then you get a number with a decimal and you round it to the nearest whole number. And you can see me doing that same thing on the calculator as we're going through. Numerator divided by denominator, multiplying it by 100, and then I round it to the nearest whole number. That's how I got the answers for these problems. For this one, the coach has to decide who's going to kick the field goal. And we have how many they made out of how many they took, how many penalty kicks they took. Notice that the numbers were all different. Since this whole unit is about percentages, I'm going to turn all of these into fractions, and then I'm going to turn them all into decimals, and then I'm going to turn them all into percentages. So I'm writing each of these ratios as a fraction. Then I'm going to take my calculator, which you are allowed to use on the test, and I'm taking the top number divided by the bottom number. I'm multiplying it by 100, and then I'm rounding it to the nearest whole number. And we find that Brian made 58% of his penalty kicks. Darius made about 65% of his penalty kicks. And you take the numerator, divide it by the denominator, multiply that by 100, and Fong made 60% of his penalty kicks. And finally, Mike, do the same thing, and he made about 59% of his penalty kicks. So the coach should have chosen Darius because Darius made the highest percentage of his penalty kicks. As you're doing this, replay any ones that don't make sense or go to the problems that you really don't understand. These problems are in a different order than maybe are on your test, because the different tests had problems in different orders, but you should have all of these. This is asking for 15% of a certain amount of money. So it's kind of like tipping at a restaurant. So to find a percentage of a number, you multiply it by the decimal equivalent. So 15% is equal to 0.15. You move the decimal point 2 spots to the left. And then of means I'm multiplying, so I multiply $36 times 15 hundredths, and I get 5.4. It's money, so I add a 0 and I add the dollar sign. I do the same thing for $18.24. I times it by 15 hundredths, and then I'm going to get my answer of 2.736. Now I'm rounding to the nearest penny, nearest hundredth. So I look at the threes place. 1 to the right is 5 or higher, so the 3 rounds up to a 4. So I would tip $2.74 if I was tipping 15%. All right, so um, this is a very hard problem. I'm going to start by saying this. A lot of you did not read the directions at the top for what Monica, is that Monica? What she was buying. She was getting 2 t-shirts, 1 pair of shorts, 1 bathing suit, 2 sandals, and 1 hat. So the first thing I needed to do was figure out how much that was for each of those. So for 2 t-shirts, it was $19.96. I got that by taking $9.98 plus $9.98. The 2 sandals, I did $15.60 plus $15.60 to get $31.20. In part A, you had to find the total and not think about the discounts. So we just added all of those prices up then, and then we are going to get our total. So part 1 of this was reading the directions at the top, and it was going to be $104.30. Now we need to figure out the discount for each of these. There's a couple of ways to do it. The easiest way to do this is going to be, I would take $19.96 and I would take 15% of that. And so I'd multiply it by 0.15. That's $2.99. So I take $19.96 minus $2.99. And so the 2 t-shirts are going to be that much. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm finding out how much they would save, how much would be taken off the price for each of these. So I'm taking the blue price and I'm multiplying it by the decimal equivalent of the percent to find out how much would be saved. It sounds more complicated than it is. I'm taking something like 31.20 times 0.2, and that's going to be $6.24 that I'll save from the 2 pairs of sandals. And then $14.20 times 0.10, which is going to be $1.42 I'm going to save. Now all I'm going to do is take the original price and subtract the discount to find out how much this person is going to have to pay for each item. Oh, I get it. I did it differently. I took how much total savings she's going to have, and then I took the original price and subtracted all of the savings, and then I get how much she is going to pay with all of the discounts, which would be $85.86. Then it says that I need to pay 6% tax, sales tax. So it's 6% of $85.86. So I take the decimal equivalent, multiply it by 85.86, and then I'm going to get how much she's going to pay in tax, which is going to be $15, and rounded to the nearest penny, 15 cents. So now I take $85.86 plus the tax, and then that's going to get me the total price she's going to have to pay for 2 t-shirts, one pair of shorts, one bathing suit, 2 sandals, and 1 hat. And it's going to be $91.01.